Welcome to Terrorverse TV, friends. My name is John Altarelli, and I'm a corporate lawyer. I have some basis in constitutional law. I did study it in law school, and I've been quite a bit of a fanboy, if you will. I do follow all the cases. I do like to keep up with the Supreme Court. It's something that's, I think, very important to people in the country, and for lawyers in particular. It's something that, it's up to us to stay on top of these things and provide our guidance to our clients as to what these rulings mean. So I'm going to do that today, provide a little bit of lawyerly take on this stuff, and we're going to look at a few TikToks, and I'm going to respond to them. I haven't seen them, so this is going to be just a raw response. Apparently that's what people like, so I get shocked and not prepared for it. And we're going to get going. But before I do, please, if you like the content, subscribe and like it. And if you have any comments or you want me to look at other areas of law or any other topics that you think might be useful, put it down in the comments, and we will put the links to these various TikToks that we're looking at, so you can also look at the full TikTok on your own. So here we go. Jenna, tee it up.
I really did not expect that they would do this. And they, Donald Trump and his counsel asked for this 100% absolute immunity thing, which was insane. I would say they got 105% of what they were asking for. They got immunity from this court, despite some of the language in Justice Roberts' ruling saying that there was some measure of humility here, some measure of restraint. The practical impact of what they have done is to give Trump immunity that even he and his counsel did not ask for. And given that the hypotheticals over the course of these arguments, as you rightly pointed out, included things like, can the president assassinate a rival? I think we have to look at the Supreme Court's affirmative answer to that. Yes, you can. With as much seriousness as it deserves. I mean, this is a death squad ruling. Okay.
Let's stop it right there. Jen, look up, is Rachel Maddow a lawyer by any chance? I'm just curious, because she's very definitive here, and I want to make sure that I don't tread on ground that,
No, she's a TV host.
TV host.
MSNBC News.
But you're sure she doesn't have a law degree or anything like that? Because she seems like she's pretty definitive here. Usually I reserve that for people who actually are constitutional scholars or lawyers or litigators or somebody who might actually have some basis and maybe have read a few Supreme Court cases.
She holds a bachelor's degree in public policy from Stanford University and a doctorate in political science from the University of Oxford.
Okay. Okay, well, she's certainly a bright person. It seems like she's got some good pedigree, but I have to say she's a little bit off base here. So let's just go back to one of her first comments, that they got 105% of everything they asked for, and they gave them complete and utter immunity. That is a blatant and false lie. Just read the very first paragraph. I mean, by the way, I don't even know if she's read the case. I think it's about 130. I've read it. It's about 113 pages, the opinion. If she hasn't read it, she ought to read it, because she just made a factually incorrect statement. But let me just sort of read the actual ruling. It's right in the front of the synopsis for the case. You don't have to dig through all 113 pages. What the court ruled was that the president has absolute immunity for official acts which are conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority. So that's stuff where the president has absolute authority under the Constitution. Okay, not something that's shared with Congress. So there's two types of authority, and she may not understand that, but that's what it covers. Number one. The second thing is he has presumptive immunity, and I say he. It's just, I shouldn't say he. It's all presidents have presumptive immunity for all of their official acts, even if they're outside of that core conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority. So things that may be shared with Congress and other things like that. And then the third thing they said, which is, I don't know how you could miss this, there's no immunity for unofficial acts. Full stop. Which is, by the way, that's been the law forever. The fact that we're even talking about this is kind of strange, because anyone who's been involved in this at all, anyone that's looked at this stuff over the years, would know that this is no deviation whatsoever from the prior rulings by the court. In fact, they had one for Nixon, there was one for Clinton, and there was one for two for Nixon. So this is not the first time that they've gone over this Immunity Act. And for example, they ruled that Clinton's acts were not in his official duties. They ruled Nixon's were. Some were and some weren't. And so they've been down this path. They've been able to determine what is official, what's not official. And clearly criminal acts that are not official are not covered. Okay, so that's the 105%, they got 105% what they asked for is absolutely, it's absurd. It's factually incorrect. Just read the first page. Anyone with a 6th grade education could read the words and kind of get it. So let's start with that one. Then, this whole notion. So what came out of that? And I don't know. Let's see what else she has to say before I get to the rest. I don't think she has much more. Let's see what she says.
As long as you can construe it as an official or quasi-official act, you can do absolutely anything, and never be held accountable, not only while you are president, but forever.
Okay. Again, absurd. You can take any act and make it official? It's absurd. Do you think that the rest of the world and all the courts and the Supreme Courts and all the people who do this for a living like me don't know the difference? I mean, it's absurd. You're disrespectful to the intelligence of all the people who do this and are involved in the court systems, and you're actually doing a disrespect to the Supreme Court, even though there was a 6-3 majority, and you could say, oh, the left, was right, the right was wrong. It's absurd because this is not the first court to take this up, and they've been consistent. They've been consistent in how they come out here, and it has to be this way. It's not a joke. And by the way, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right, if the Democrats decided to use lawfare. That's the word I keep people are using, but basically half, if not all of these cases that were brought, and I can at some point go over all of them. I looked at every single one of them, and I believe almost every single one of them will be overturned on appeal because they're ridiculous and they're absolutely politically motivated. And I can go through the cases. If somebody wants to sit there and go through the law and the facts, and I can explain that. But you don't get that when you look at these pundits on TV. They just throw a bunch of stuff that people want to hear out there, like he can go do anything. And even in the dissent, in Sotomayor's dissent, so disingenuous. And people are saying, oh, he can just get a Navy SEAL to come in and kill his political appointees, and that would be an official act. That is ridiculous. There is no judge, no court, no rational human being who's going to sit there and suggest that he can go kill Biden, hire the SEALs and go kill Biden or somebody else, and that's going to be an official act. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous on its face. It's absurd. And when you make arguments like that, you lose any credibility to have a rational discussion about this, which I'm fine to have. There needs to decide what are the limits of official and unofficial. That's an argument we can have, and that's a discussion that rational legal minds can do, and they can work it out like we do in every other area of law. This isn't the only contentious area of law, and you can work it out, and you can tell the difference, okay? And the other thing is, this is the first time. This is why we're having this stupid discussion. This is the first time that a former president's ever been brought up on a criminal charge and prosecuted in the history of the country. Why did it? You're talking in 200 some odd 300 years, we haven't, no one else has bothered to try it. I mean, come on. And there's a reason why, because it's a dumbass thing to do. And this is what's going on. You're ruining our democracy. They're saying Trump's going to be a dictator. Trump's going to be I don't even like Trump, but these claims are so absurd. They're so absurd that I don't even understand how really smart people, and with her pedigree, I can't even imagine how she could say that with a straight face. That's the case, and it's 105% of what they asked for. So the net is the court came out where it should come out. He has official acts. Why does he need that? Very simple. When he sends people off to war and kill people, right? That's murder, right? You can call that murder. Killing's killing, right? So at the end of the day, and by the way, all the international treaties, you can look at this. It's not just the U.S. Supreme Court comes out this way. We don't allow presidents of leaders of countries to be indicted. There are a couple of international bodies that keep trying that stuff, but we don't abide by those, and we're not a part of those treaties. And the reason why we don't is because every president will be brought up in some international court because some other country doesn't like what we're doing, and we would be subject to that. We can't have that. You can't run the country. You can't run the military. You can't run law enforcement, right? Which has to have the right, by the way, to do what? Potentially protect themselves and kill people, okay? We have these FISA laws where they're going to do surveillance. Some of that stuff, in my view, goes over the top. It's over, outside of the bounds of the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment. But yet, the president has the right to do that. Congress has given them the right. They've extended the FISA Act, and they've actually broadened it so they can even do more surveillance on U.S. citizens, which is not the intent of the law. So there's a ton of areas where you can say, hey, this is part of what the president has to do. And he can't be on top of being vilified by his political opponents. And people want, and that's what you're supposed to do. Run against him. If you don't like what he's doing, get him out. Okay, that's where all of this comes down to. He's not a dictator. People should stop using that word. It's ridiculous. And we're not going to go to dictatorship. Again, ridiculous. And if you don't like who's in office, vote him out. I'm not a fan of Biden, but he's the president. He's the commander-in-chief. I go by whatever he says. I subscribe to the rule of law, and I will abide by it, even if I don't like it. And I'm going to keep my mouth shut for the most part about it, even though I have plenty of views about it. I'll just vote to get him out if I don't think he's the right guy. Same thing with your Congress people. Do the same thing. If you don't like the laws that they're passing, vote them out. Stop trying to use, these crazy arguments, and stop trying to say you want to stack the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's got to be disbanded. It's become a rogue institution. Again, ridiculous, and shows your lack of any historical context. You haven't paid attention at all to how the Supreme Court's operated since our inception. And if you really want to know some facts, I'll give you some facts, because when I was in law school, this is over 30 years ago, because I love the Supreme Court and I love constitutional law, I did a 50-year study of all Supreme Court rulings over a 50-year period, starting with FDR through Bush, and I ranked them as to see what the bias was of the appointees. So for all the presidents all the Supreme Court justices that were appointed by Democrats and by Republicans, to see whether the court was left or right over this period of time. And what I found was startling, and I didn't really expect that. Even though during that period, after FDR stacked the entire court, it was completely Democratic. It was I think 8 or 9-0. So for a long period of time, we had democratically controlled courts. And by the way, Reconstruction, by the way, it was democratically controlled as well for the most part. And then the only time when the Republicans really held sway and got a lot of things done, by the way, was the Civil War era, and past the Civil War era, where they tried to get a lot of things done to get the country put back together again. It was a Republican, predominantly Republican court, because the Republicans kind of had the control back then, Lincoln in that era. And then from FDR forward, okay, it's been democratically controlled until just recently. Even though, if you can go just look at the numbers, look at the justices, you'll say, that more Republicans are on some of these courts than Democrats. It's just not true, because there are 5 justices who were appointed by Republicans who were the most liberal of all justices probably in the last 50 years. Earl Warren, William Brennan Jr., Harry Blackmun, John Paul Stevens, and Davis Souter, okay? Those justices did not vote in accordance with their party. They voted however they felt, and they were far left for the most part. And at the end of the day, you can accuse Republicans of stacking the court, but boy, if they did a horrible job, because some of the most liberal justices were appointed by Republican presidents. And you've even seen that now. You've seen Kavanaugh go off and vote the other way. You've seen Barrett go and vote the other way. They're not consistently voting by political parties. Some of the justices do on both sides. But in fact, the ones on the left absolutely do. There's no question. Sotomayor and Kagan and Jackson, they are completely voting the party line, with one exception, which is kind of funny. Even they couldn't stomach letting Colorado keep Trump off the ballot. We had a unanimous decision against Colorado. And people were, well, there you go. Even your own appointees couldn't go that far because it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And a lot of these lawsuits are in the same vein. They're completely politically motivated, and someday maybe I'll go over each one. But for today, let's start with the Supreme Court one. I can't believe I'm hearing people complain about this. This is the law. It's been the law. It shouldn't even be questioned, and it's the right law. And it doesn't mean he could commit a criminal act outside of his official duties and get away with it. It does not. The Supreme Court said that explicitly. You can't be any clearer. And then sit there and say, well, we won't be able to determine whether it's an official or unofficial act. That's just too broad of a term. Well, that's why we have the Supreme Court. That's why we have other courts. And by the way, that's why we have normal, rational people who can tell the difference. They can tell the difference between good and bad. Apparently, the left can't do that anymore. But there are a lot of people that can. And at the end of the day, you can tell what's official, what's not official, and you can't shoehorn everything into that. And yes, arguments are going to be made by lawyers in defense of their clients. Of course they will. Will they make crazy arguments that things are official when they're not official? Of course they will. And by the way, the courts ruled against them in the past. And it's usually about documents. They want to have presidential immunity on disclosure, and the court said no. For the most part, you don't get that. So it's clear that courts, both left and right dominated, have made these determinations, and they've made them, in my view, in every single case, I looked at them all, correctly. I don't always agree with the Supreme Court decisions. I don't, and it's okay. But I live with them because that's the law of the land. Without the rule of law, we have nothing. And if you don't live with that, then that's a problem. If you don't like it, go to Congress, ask them to pass some other laws. Vote on your party. Get more people elected. Let them appoint more seats in the Congress. In the Supreme Court. And that's why it's sort of balanced. The whole point of having these appointments was so that no president would have too much control. And which president had the most control and appointed the most justices? It ain't Trump. It was FDR, a Democrat. Okay, so stop the whining. Okay, you'll get your day again, I'm sure. It won't be long. You'll have some Democrat control of the presidency, and you'll get some new people in there, and we'll be back to fighting, and the right will be complaining about the democratically controlled Supreme Court. But I've never heard, and maybe I'm missing. I go, look, I don't recall the right claiming to just abolish the Supreme Court or stack the Supreme Court. The only person that ever did that was FDR. No one else tried to stack the court. I've never heard a Republican say that because we believe in the rule of law, and it's got to be that way. All right, what other clips do we have, Jen? I went a little bit off on that one, but that one kind of ticked me off because when people misstate the facts, you just got to read the first page of the opinion, and you can't possibly get the same conclusion unless you don't know how to read. Who's next?
It took mere hours after the Supreme Court handed down its bombshell ruling granting Trump partial immunity for criminal acts committed in office for him to seek to overturn his Manhattan conviction, citing this exact Supreme Court decision. Donald Trump is now seeking to throw out his conviction and postpone his sentencing, which is coming up on July 11th, citing now that the immunity granted to him by the Supreme Court absolves him of culpability for the 34 felony counts on which he was convicted. In terms of whether this gamble is going to work, it's anyone's guess. On one hand, the Manhattan case focuses on acts that Trump took as a candidate. He was literally running to become president and falsified business records to hide an affair he had with Stormy Daniels to help himself in the upcoming election. So this Supreme Court ruling shouldn't apply. But on the other hand, Trump's team will argue that prosecutors built their case using evidence from Trump's time in the White House. Like, for example, checks that he signed while he was president. But under this new Supreme Court ruling, prosecutors aren't allowed to cite evidence involving official acts, meaning if any evidence had even a tangential relationship to Trump's official position in office, then it can't be used, even if the crime at hand has nothing to do with official acts. So there is a world in which Trump's defense attorneys could convince a certain kind of judge to side with them. And after this week, I'm sure it's not exactly a stretch to trust me when I say that there are plenty of judges like that, and that Trump's team has a way of ending up in their courtrooms. Granted, there is yet another wrinkle for Trump. The deadline for filing post-trial motions was last month, meaning it may be too late to even raise this issue. It may have to be held until such time as Trump appeals whatever his sentence is. With that said, the Manhattan DA was expected to make a sentencing recommendation to Judge Merchan on Monday about whether to imprison Trump or not, and yet they failed to make that motion. Whether that has something to do with the Supreme Court ruling remains to be seen, but it's worth noting that that was expected to be submitted. All of which is to say everything is very much up in the air, very much in flux, and very much at the mercy of what a number of judges, prosecutors, and lawyers ultimately decide to do. All of which is to say, things are very much up in the air, all thanks to a Supreme Court whose job is to interpret the Constitution as written, and yet which instead decided to invent out of whole cloth entirely new provisions of what the Constitution actually says. I mean, think about this for a moment. These people parade themselves around as textualists and originalists, and yet they decided that a Constitution that said quite literally nothing about presidential immunity for criminal activity somehow existed. To be clear, it doesn't. In fact, the Constitution does offer civil immunity for legislators through what's called speech and debate. So the fact that the framers put that in the Constitution and yet chose not to put anything about criminal immunity for presidents shows us by negative inference that the decision to do so was deliberate. This Supreme Court then overturned 200 plus years of precedent. And yet, on the opposite side of the coin, consider Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. There, the plain text of the Constitution says that no office holder who, having previously taken an oath to support the Constitution, shall have engaged in insurrection against the same. Doesn't get clearer than that. And yet somehow, that was too ambiguous for this Supreme Court. They will ignore the obvious words in blind deference to their God King while creating out of whole cloth new provisions to shield him. They do not serve the Constitution. They serve Donald Trump. And they should 100% be impeached
All right,
and
so
removed.
let's stop there. I don't know if I can listen anymore. So who is this guy? Look him up. What's his background? Because this guy is amazing. Wow, he's making what's her name look like she actually knows a whole lot more about the law than he does. Let's see who he is.
Commentator, actor, MSNBC contributor.
What's his? Is he a lawyer?
Where did Brian go to college? Graduated from Lehigh University with a BS degree in business and economics and a BA degree in English. He was the class president. No, not a lawyer.
Okay, another uninformed, commentator, non-expert, whatever. By the way, I don't claim to be a constitutional expert either, but I do know some things, and I know how to read the law, and I understand the Constitution. I also understand how the process works. So let's just take a few of his points, okay? Well, he's a good-looking guy, by the way. He looks good in the suit, and he certainly speaks well and can be convincing to the uninformed. So let's start with the whole notion that they just made this up out of whole cloth and that it's not in the text. In case he hasn't read, about 1,000 of these cases, nothing is 100% based on the literal wording of the Constitution. It's interpreted by the Supreme Court. That's what they're there for. And they use common law procedures, which is basically on past cases, past analysis. And if you happen to read the 113 pages, every other word is a citation to other cases. So they have dealt with the entire universe of precedent. That's what the Supreme Court does. They go back and they research every single case that's relevant to the matter, and they look at the entire history. They look at the congressional record. They look at the times. You have to be on the Supreme Court and to be good at it, and not every one of them are, because some of them are just really political appointees. They're not really what I would consider constitutional scholars. They have to be a historian as well, as a constitutional scholar. You have to know the constitutional case law, which is extensive. Very few people have read them all. Maybe no one has. But at the end of the day, these people who are in there, and they're clerks, by the way, they rely on a lot of really smart, lawyers out of law school from the best law schools who really work their butts off in there reading these cases. And by the way, everyone that's gone through law school knows what we're talking about. You read thousands of cases, thousands. And you have to in order to understand what's going on. And to say that this is out of whole cloth is ridiculous. And there's been other cases. I just cited a couple. There was Nixon. There was Clinton. Nixon twice. They've gone through this issue. This is not a new issue. Again, it's just new to you, maybe new to him, or maybe he hasn't, doesn't remember what happened, 40, 50 years. It doesn't look like he's old enough. So I get it. There's a little bit of a problem if you can't go back and read, or you didn't live through it. I understand. But it's ridiculous. And then to sort of say, that he's going to try to overturn his New York case. Yeah, he might. I don't think if it was me, I wouldn't use the Supreme Court immunity to overturn it. There's a ton of other absolutely valid reasons to have that overturned. And I just love it. This is the thing that I love the left doing on this one. 34 felony acts. They're all the same, out of the same facts and circumstances. Cut it out. It's one act, okay? It's different pieces of paper. It's a joke, okay? It's just a total and absolute joke. And not only that, all of the stuff that goes along with it. Okay, the way they didn't pay attention to the statute of limitations. There's so many defects in that prosecution that any reasonable appellate court will absolutely, positively throw it out. Okay, absolutely. Now, will that happen in New York? Well, you never know. New York is not normal, okay? New York and California are sort of outliers. They're certainly politically motivated. They're elected political judges. So can we count on that happening in New York or California? Maybe not. But I think if you go to, 40 other states with the same set of facts, take Donald Trump's name out of there, this case would be thrown out, in a minute. It's really a travesty to watch the whole thing and to pay attention to it. As a lawyer, I was embarrassed for the people involved, and I'm embarrassed for the people that are going after Trump this way. Again, I am no Trump fan, but at the end of the day, I'm a lawyer who cares about the rule of law, who wants it to be enforced appropriately, who wants reasonable people to look at the law and interpret it reasonably, and to accept the rulings even when you don't like them. There are plenty of Supreme Court rulings that I don't like, and I think were wrongly decided. There are tons of litigation matters that I don't think were right. There are tons of interpretations on regulatory rules that are wrong, and most of us lawyers that do this stuff know that, and we just have to live with it because that's the precedent. You live with it, and you live your life working with that. If you want to change it, you got to go to Congress to change it. Now, on the constitutional stuff, you can't go to Congress, but if you want to amend the Constitution, you can do that. If you feel strongly about it, we have 27 amendments. I mean, it can be done. So, just stop whining about it and do something if you don't like it. Stop saying you're going to impeach the Supreme Court. That's the most absurd thing. That's exactly why we have the separation of powers, is to keep people who make crazy claims like that from even contemplate that. If every time you don't like what someone does, you want to throw them out because they're not politically aligned with you, it's absurd. And I've lived with tons of, years in my lifetime, which is mostly democratically controlled, and I've had to put up with it, and I don't care. And I didn't go after them. I didn't like the rulings, but I live with them. And as a corporate lawyer, we don't advocate. So we don't go and try to make political statements. What we try to do, and we try to do it very well because our clients will not tolerate anything else, is to figure out where is the law at this point in time. How is it being interpreted? What is the law? Whether we like it or not, we try to get it right. We tell our clients what we think it should be applied to the facts and circumstances of what we're working on, and then to comply with it. We don't try to make political statements in our deals. It's crazy. We try to comply with the law. And there's a lot of crazy stuff out there. I mean, the carried interest tax thing. I mean, I can go on and on. I can go through every area of the law and give you absurd examples of things that just make no sense and are wrong, but they're part of the body of law which we live with, and we live with it every day. And we live with the president, whether you like him or don't. That's what America is. You have to live with it. If more than half the people put somebody in office, too bad for the rest of us. You got to hope that you stop fighting with each other to the point where they'll do the right thing for the most of us, okay? And for mostly importantly, for the people who have very little power. I'm not worried about the rich people. I'm not worried about me. I'm not worried about, these people on TV. They're all going to be fine. They all do well. They've got a platform for doing whatever they're doing. It's not them that are going to be affected by these stupid things that they want to do. It's going to be the average Joe and Mary who are out there just trying to live a decent life and have to be subject to all these, back and forth between the parties, fighting over stuff that makes no sense, and acting like there's going to be a dictatorship and democracy's on their attack. It's ridiculous. Stop saying it. It's laughable. And anyone saying it is laughable. You have zero credibility with any rational-minded person to say those things. It just makes no sense. You don't need to like it, okay? Lots of things I don't like. But at least be open-minded. First of all, read the decision and read the words and stop trying to, make everything, stop being hyperbolic, stop being exaggerating about all these things. You don't need to like it. And the notion that he's going to go out there and get all of his criminal cases that are outside of his official acts overturned because of the immunity, that ain't going to happen. Now, of course Trump's going to try that. That's Trump, right? That's who he is. And I expect that from him. And by the way, I expect that from Biden or anyone else. Biden's got a pretty good little track record there of stuff that I wouldn't be so proud of. And believe me, if criminal lawyers wanted to go after him and his son for the stuff that they did, and I have some personal knowledge of some of that stuff, I can tell you there's a case to be made there as well. But if I was Trump and he gets reelected, I would leave him alone. I would stop this pettiness. I would stop this, lawfare against your political opponents. Just let it go and get on with running the country and stop trying to prevent the country from deciding, the people in the country decide who they want to lead them. Okay. If you don't like it, then, move, or advocate for more people. And it's another funny thing, because I've been hearing this a lot lately, and it's really starting to, get on my nerve that somehow there's this white old men have cabal that controls the country. It's outrageous, okay? First of all, if you just take the boomers alone, and it's male and female, it's 70 million people. There's 72 million millennials. There's 70 million Gen X's. There's 60 million Gen Z's. They're 3 to 1 outnumber the older generation. And if you take the women out of there, it's even more than that. If you take all the minorities out of that, it's even more than that. White old men are not controlling anything, okay? At the end of the day, you're controlling it, and if you don't do a good job of it, you keep putting in people at the Democratic Party that are not doing the right thing for you, that's your problem. Okay, don't complain to me. I can't have any sway. I live in New York. My vote means nothing if I'm a Republican. 70% goes to the Democrats. So what's the deal? I have very little voice. I don't care. I live with it, and I still live in New York, even though it's the highest tax state, and I pay a ton of income taxes, and there's so much junk here that it's annoying. But at the end of the day, it's where I live. It's where my family is, and I'll probably stay here for the rest of my life. I don't know. I mean, maybe eventually they'll push me out because it gets to be too much. So, Jen, let's flip on and see what else this guy has to say, because I almost couldn't take the first part. Yeah, he was done when he started, but go ahead and bring him on. Of course, I don't want to start a war with this guy.
Faithfully execute their duties in office. So look, it remains to be seen what happens in New York, but hopefully Judge Merchan will not allow himself to get rolled by Donald Trump in the same way that the rest of the justice system is getting rolled by Donald Trump. The only way our democracy survives is if the people with the power to hold him to account actually exercise that power. Not to put too much pressure on Judge Merchan, but what he does on July 11th will speak volumes. Not just in terms of holding Trump to account for the crimes that he committed in New York, but also in terms of showing us more broadly that while he might own these far-right hacks on the Supreme Court, that the rule of law still exists in other courtrooms in this country. Americans' confidence in the rule of law may very well falter if Judge Merchan doesn't live up to his duty to hold this remorseless, dangerous criminal to account just over a week from now.
All right, so I got to be careful because I don't want to lower myself to this sort of, tit for tat, name calling stuff, the political hacks and this, that. It's absurd. I'm not a fan of some of the Democratic appointed Supreme Court justices, but you know what? They're Supreme Court justices. I respect them. Okay. They're in that role. I will live with the rulings that they make, even if I don't agree with them. I will not attack them personally. I will not call them hacks. I will not impugn anything about them because that job that they're doing is a very, very important job, whether I agree with them or not. And at the end of the day, whether we can argue about who had the best bona fides or not, and I'm not going to get into that because just to even get anywhere near to be considered for a Supreme Court justice role is a pretty impressive thing. And my hat is off to all of them. Incredible. I would never make it through that process. I don't have the chops or the background. I don't even have the desire, frankly, to do that work. So I have enormous respect for them. And I think the rest of the country and all these pundits that don't have any clue about how hard it is to do what they do should tone it down a bit, okay? Tone it down a bit. They take their job very seriously. I think, you should respect that. You don't get there without that. And even though they may have political divisions between what they think is right and wrong, I think their convictions are real, right? Even if I don't agree with them, they're real, and they should be heard. And by the way, I like a divided court. Why? Because you get the best arguments on both sides. So we get to see, the rest of us get to see the real arguments, the cases, the precedent. And what I don't like, though, is when, and by the way, if you want to have some fun, if you want to have a little fun with constitutional law, go back and read some of the older cases. Some of the most brilliant, eloquent writing in history. It's wonderful. Sort of reminds me of the Federalist Papers or some of the early stuff that was done in our country. The writing is exquisite, and it is very clear, and it is brilliant. And you can read those cases. And then when you see today, when you see the cases, it's sort of devolved into a high school, debate or, grammar school name calling thing. It's just a joke. It demeans the court, it demeans the justices, and it demeans anyone that takes that approach to this stuff where the best thing they can do is call you a name. They can't argue the merits. They can't argue the facts. They're going to just call you a name. You're a bigot, you're a racist, you're white supremacist, whatever the heck it is, you're a hack. And to suggest that Mershon, this is even the most laughable thing. If you live in New York and you watch that case, Mershon rolled Trump without a doubt. Just like the other cases, Trump gets no breaks, zero. He's the most vilified defendant in history. And to suggest that he is like rolling over the Supreme Court or rolling over Mershon, are you kidding me? He has very little hope of winning anything in New York or getting a fair trial in New York. And anyone that knows anything would know that. Normally you would move that case out of New York because you can't get a fair trial there. We often move cases to other jurisdictions when the jury pool is going to be so politically tainted or whatever or biased that they can't render a fair and impartial judgment. And they didn't do that here. And we also now know from the fact that the judge had to postpone things because there's been some jury potential tampering and other things. And I don't know if that'll ever turn out to be anything or not. I'm not prejudging any of that stuff. They'll all come out. This will be briefed on appeal, and we'll see what happened. And hopefully, Trump has some good lawyers. I don't know who he really has, and I don't know any of the lawyers he works with. But there are a lot of good lawyers out there that would do a great job of briefing these cases, and would do a great job on appeal. So we'll see what happens on those cases. I have a feeling, and this has been my assumption all along when I started seeing these crazy cases, that Trump's going to win most of them on appeal. Some of them he may not be just because he's going to be in a jurisdiction where he can't, and it's not going to be appealable to the Supreme Court maybe, and that could be the case. But the Colorado case, I predicted from the beginning, and everybody said, "Oh no, you're crazy. It's baloney." There's no chance that Colorado's going to keep him off the ballot. And even then, okay, some of the best, some of the most prominent, liberal scholars like Lawrence Tribe and these other, they wrote this, these other law professors, right? 6 or so of the most prominent there was, and I don't know how many other people signed on to it. Everybody jumps on the bandwagon, just like the stuff on Trump with the Russian interference in the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian propaganda, and all these former intelligence community guys wrote a letter, and it's all bullshit, and they somehow they have credibility, they have zero credibility. So Lawrence Tribe and all these other scholars, they wrote a really detailed memo on this Colorado case, why the 14th Amendment, the third section of the 14th Amendment was going to be self-executing. They didn't even have to prove a crime. It was an interesting paper. There was some good stuff in there. I read it, and it was pretty good, interesting. But at the end of the day, the Supreme Court, including the 3 liberal justices, 9-0, didn't come out that way. And thank goodness they didn't, because they couldn't, even with good conscience in their own mind, couldn't do it. And thank God that's behind us now. But it doesn't mean you're not going to have these left-wing legal scholars. And by the way, they're brilliant. I mean, Lawrence Tribe, he's a genius. There's no question. I couldn't stand next to him in terms of what he knows about constitutional law. I would never even attempt that. But I'm not so naive that I can't read and I can see his bias. Okay, he takes positions that are biased, for clearly he does it, but he's really good at arguing. And by the way, if you don't know any better, guess what? You're going to be fooled by it. But flat out, he was wrong. His own colleagues on the court disagreed. So I don't even have to be the one. I'm on the other side of the aisle for the most part, but at the end of the day, it was obvious to me. So there's going to be a lot of this happening. You're going to see a lot of these cases are going to get tossed. And thank goodness this immunity one came out where it came out. And that's the law of the land. It should be the law of the land. And we got to treat every president the same, because otherwise this is going to be an ongoing process where the other side is going to try to indict the president for whatever they want to do. They're going to, impeachment has become a rite of passage now. We're going to impeach every president, everything we don't like about them. It's got to stop. Okay. It makes us look like fools around the world. The whole presidency, and now we're going to attack our Supreme Court, which is one of the most revered institutions in the world and always has been. You want to bring that down and ruin that over political points of view, rather than try to support the rule of law and support the process that we have and the separation of powers that we have, which has worked fairly well. But now you want to just tear that down? You know, and I attack this all across the board. I'm not a big fan of executive orders. That's legislation by the executive branch that shouldn't happen. And that just is a recent phenomenon over the last few decades, and it's become absolutely crazy now, where the presidents can decide to make their own laws and have these executive orders. That should be stopped. It's not fair. It's not right. It wasn't what the founders intended to have for separation of powers. Congress makes the laws. And we need to get back to that. That way we wouldn't have this situation at the border where one president puts an executive order in, the next guy just changed it. And they override, by the way. There is already legislation and laws out there that were passed by Congress that they overrode. Both of them. So they're both guilty of it. And that's where we should put a stop to. We had laws in place for immigration, and I'm going to do a spot on that down the road, and with a really good immigration expert, not me, but I'm going to bring in someone who really knows this stuff, and we're going to talk about this stuff. And we're going to go through the real laws, okay, and the real facts, not the stuff that the mainstream, corporate media puts out there, and all these pundits who are actors and political scientists and whatever they are, talking about the Supreme Court. They should stay in their own lane, and and stick to what they know, acting or pontificating. But it's embarrassing to people who actually know what they're doing to have to listen to this stuff. And I normally don't, but Jenna's now making me listen to these TikToks. I wish I hadn't, because I can tell you what, they're really annoying. Do we have another one, Jen, before we wrap it up?
There's one more if you want to watch it.
I might as well. I'm in the room now. I've already like opened up this can of whoop ass, and I'm gonna pay a price for it. But let's get it going.
Alex Perlman, he has 2.7 million followers.
Wow, I'm dead after this. He's gonna cancel me.
He's just an actor and comedian. He's a comedian, but he
Oh, I hope he's funny.
podcast, and he was on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Oh, good. Maybe he's funny. Let's see what happens. An actor,
So my
comedian.
mom just texted me, and she's like, hey, don't look at the news right now. And I'm like, why? What happened? And she's like, well, you're at the airport, and I don't want you to get upset because, you said you can't yell at the airport. And I'm like, because I am. I'm still at an airport. And I'm like, Mom, what happened? And she's like, the Trump immunity decision just dropped from the Supreme Court. And I just scrolled through that. So we cooked. Y'all, listen, I don't want to catastrophize too much. I don't want to ruin your Monday. The Supreme Court decided to do that instead. I don't want to ruin your July 4th. Your July 4th is fucking meaningless. Right now, the Supreme Court basically just said president can do whatever the fuck they want. And then when they leave office, you can't really be prosecuted. You have to prove that wasn't presidential. That's what they said. It has to be an unofficial act. An unofficial act. So as long as they put it on presidential stationery, it's fine. As long as it says from the office of the President of the United States on the top, then that's official, baby. And we can spend decades in court arguing otherwise. So here I am, still stuck in an airport, and here we are, just being proven over and over again that the writers have been writing this nation real shit, and we cooked. That's it. That's where I'm at right now. We cooked. Have a good day. Hope you guys have enjoyed it so far. Make sure y'all turn the lights out when you leave America.
Wow. Okay. Well, he looks like a cool dude. I'm gonna have to catch his act to see if his bits are funnier than this, because this wasn't funny at all. And again, very naive, uninformed statements, and saying that we can't tell the difference between official acts. I mean, again, this is absurd. It's immature to even suggest that. But again, he's a comic. He should, he's probably good at that. I can't wait. I'll go see one of his shows. He sounds like he might be a funny guy. But clearly he's out of his depth here, and he should. It's good to have the opinion. I'm fine with that. I'm okay if he's upset with it. Absolutely, it's okay. And he can say what he wants. He's got a big platform. He can try to convince people, uninformed people, that that his point of view has any merit. But the reality is, it doesn't. And you can't. We're going to put it on a stationery as an official act. I mean, come on. I mean, it's hard to take you seriously, my friend, if you say stuff like that. Okay, if you want to make an argument that it might be difficult, like, for example, Kagan's argument about, Trump can get a Navy SEAL, at least she came up with a hypothetical, and it was an absurd one, and that wasn't helpful to her, right? She probably, if she thought a little bit more about it, and she's a very, very smart person, so she probably could come up with some. Matter of fact, I can think about one, and I'll come up with a few, because there are certainly going to be things on the edge, right, where they're going to be a tough call, whether or not they're official or unofficial. No question. There will be some of those. But the ones that you're talking about, or the ones that these people are talking about, they're absurd. No one's going to make those official acts. No one. And it doesn't matter if someone like Trump argues for that. That's fine. Let him argue all he wants. There's enough smart, rational people in this world who know better. And the Supreme Court will do better. And they will rule correctly. And I believe they will for the most part. Not 100%. They never do. Because there is politics involved. That's just the way it is. But at the end of the day, for the most part, they try to do the right thing and interpret the Constitution appropriately. They do. I believe that. And I believe it because I don't think you would even be in that position you wouldn't spend your entire life getting to the top of the top. There's only 9 of them, okay? Think about what a small cohort, okay, what a elite position to get to and how hard it must be with the 1.4 million lawyers out in the U.S., 1.4 plus, maybe it's more than that only 9 of them get to the top of the heap. Well, that you better take seriously. I do. And because I know how hard it is to even do this stuff at the highest level, because I've been doing it for 30-something years, and some of the best lawyers I've ever met, some of the smartest people I ever met were in this game, and they're impressive. And they would never say the kind of things that I hear. They're very measured. They're very careful. They're very precise with their words. They don't misspeak with, make misstatements. They're very, very careful. Our drafting is very, very strict in that way. If you've ever been involved with corporate or even litigation, particularly corporate, because we're trying to comply, we're not making arguments. You get a little more leeway when you're making arguments than you do when you're doing a corporate document. We kind of have to stick to very dry, precise, almost, mechanical-like language to sort of make sure that the meaning is there so that no one will argue over what the words say. We spend all of our time trying to make it clear what the parties intended so that if you read it 5 years from now or 10 years from now and you never were involved in the transaction, the words will be clear enough that you can know what the parties intended. And we don't have a lot of litigation, comparatively speaking or relatively speaking to the number of deals we do, for that very reason. As a matter of fact, I think I've done over 1,000 M&A deals, and I think I've had 2 litigations, and they were not even on my deals, the deals I happened to work on, over some earn-out language that ultimately we absolutely won. It was just really people not happy with the terms that they agreed to. So it doesn't happen that often because the lawyers on both sides are very smart, they're very careful, and they do a great job of documenting the intention of the parties. So it can be done, okay? And we have to interpret all kinds of laws, and we have to apply them to new sets of facts all the time. We have to make judgment calls all the time, and we do a pretty good job of it. And I think you will find that the courts will do a pretty good job of it if you go all the way through the appeal. Sometimes it takes a whole appeal process to get to the right answer. And you'll often see a trial court get overturned by an intermediate court, and then that intermediate court gets overturned by a higher court. And often you'll have 4 separate courts coming out differently on the same set of facts and law. Why? Because you think they're all political? No, because it's a difficult call that had a lot of nuance to it. And sometimes, people see it differently. And sometimes legal scholars will see it differently. There's going to be that happening. It doesn't mean throw the whole system out because you don't always get your way. That's like a child, right? You don't get your way, throw them out, leave the country. Come on, grow up. Cut it out. It's ridiculous to say that stuff. Live with the facts we have, and you can change the country if you want to. How? Vote. Get out there and do what you got to do. Advocate for this stuff. Stop whining about it and do something about it. Go get people to vote. If you don't like the Supreme Court, then go make sure that the Democrats control the next, six elections, or at least 8 years. You'll get at least 2 more seats, maybe 3. Okay? And then you're good. And then you'll have the upper hand. And I can assure you, if I'm still alive, and I won't be, I will not be sitting there calling the other Supreme Court justices that were appointed by Democrats hacks and idiots and asking to abolish the court, right? Or the democracy's in jeopardy. Gee, come on, give me a break. Stop the whining, okay? Stop it. It's just got to stop. And the whole country's in this whole whiny state now. It's a joke. Just get over it, okay? Live with it. Say your piece if you have to say your piece. I'm fine with that. I could care less. I'll listen to you. I'm actually listening to this guy. I don't even know him, but I listen to him. And if he wants to come, talk to me on my show, or I'll go on his show, whatever, happy to do it. I'm well able to be open to hearing from him, and I will not disrespect him. I will not call him a name. I will not, I will not do any of that stuff. I will listen. I will say what I have to say, and I will give him the forum to do whatever he wants to do and to say his piece, because that's what we're all about in this country. I don't have to agree with you. I don't have to hate you because I don't agree with you. I damn sure don't want to hate you. But if people keep pushing these agendas with this sort of hatred and this sort of vitriol, you're going to cause people to react similarly. And it's unfortunate. Matter of fact, if you know anything about my Terrorverse salon that I run on a monthly basis, one of the key ingredients to that is that we don't allow people to be disrespectful. We have a very, very strict code of conduct where people can disagree all they want, but they need to be respectful about it. And they need to be articulate about their position. Don't just come in there and throw a bunch of stuff off the wall like I hear on a lot of these pundits. Bring something to the table, because the room is full of really smart people who actually know things. And if you're going to come out there with some half-baked concepts and ridiculous hypotheticals, the people in the room are going to, first of all, they may not even respond to it because they're not going to waste their time, right? Some things are not worth wasting their time over, like today's. All of these, Jen, I hate to tell you, all this was kind of a waste of time. It's not going to change their points of view. It's not going to change anything. They're going to have a huge platform, all of them. They're going to, the major news streams and, big followings on TikTok or wherever the heck they are. So they've got massive platforms. They've got a bunch of believers. They've got the cults that are behind them. So they're going to be fine, and they're going to be able to keep spouting this stuff off, and people are going to keep lapping it up because they want to hear it in a little echo chamber. But it's unfortunate. They should read the stuff. Number one, read the documents, okay? Read the case, okay? I got mine right here, okay? Look at it for, and the facts, okay? And if you don't know anything about the constitutional law and the history of the Constitution or the Supreme Court or the makeup of it, it's out there. You can go look it up. I looked it up. Not only that, but I did a intensive analysis, 50-year analysis. I went through all the cases to figure out things, to learn things, okay, about the court. I've read thousands upon thousands of cases. That's part of my job. And so I don't come at this, with zero background, and yet I don't profess to be a scholar, because there are people who actually are in this area. You want to come into my backyard, you want to get into corporate law, I'll take anyone on there. I feel pretty good about my bona fides in that area. I think I've earned the chops over 30 plus years of doing this stuff at the top level with the top lawyers on the other side and on my side, that if I'm in my domain, I'll take that battle. When I'm out of my domain, I try to be informed. I have an opinion, but it's an opinion. It's not definitive. But I also try to bring the facts to the table. Okay? I read this stuff and say, hey, these are the facts. How did you get there? How did you come up with that theory? When it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. And it's disingenuous, and it's disrespectful, and it's hurtful to the people who you're trying to influence to give them bad facts because it fits the narrative. In the long run, that does not help. If you want to get solutions, start with the basic facts, start with the program, start with who got us here, and then try to figure out how to get to where we want to go as a country, as a people. Because I don't want people suffering. But to waste all this time on Donald Trump, what a waste of energy that's been going on for the last 3 years or so, and he's not even the president. You would think he was the president the way they've been attacking him. He's a candidate, and it's amazing that they haven't stopped. They're so afraid of this guy, which I don't know why. They're so afraid of him that they can't get out of their own way. Stop it. Trump will implode on his own. Leave him alone. He'll make a dumb mistake on his own. I'm pretty sure of it. Just leave him alone and let him do what he's going to do. I'm sure he'll find some law to break that's not covered by an official act. If you leave him alone, just cut it out. Let's worry about making sure Joe Biden doesn't die on the campaign trail. Poor guy. I mean, it's terrible that they've put him through that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm not even nearly as old as Joe, and I can't walk around, very well sometimes. I got some blood clots in my legs. I wouldn't want to be running up and down, Air Force One. Why don't they put an escalator there? Why do they make him do that? It's like ridiculous. I mean, give the guy a break, okay? He's out there trying to do a job. He's old. He's suffering. I don't even think I'll make it to Joe's age. So my hat's off to him. And I respect the fact that he did what he did because he thought he needed to do it to save the country. I don't have a lot else to say good about Joe, but I as a human being and as a guy that I think is trying his best and working being the president is the hardest job in the world. I all the respect in the world to anyone who wants to be the president and is the president. And his people have done a terrible injustice by not protecting him better. They never should have had him do debate. What was the point of the debate for him? Nothing. He can't possibly win in the debates. And who cares? Why give Trump another platform if you don't like him to attack Joe? Just go to the election. People already know who they're going to vote for. These debates aren't going to swing them, other than it probably hurt Biden. I hate to say it. He's lost a lot of his own base now because even the corporate media on his side have been attacking him relentlessly. And I really tell you what, of all the things I'm going to say today, I'm going to wrap this up. They should be ashamed of themselves. Okay, they propped him up. They denied that he had any issues, that there's no problems with his health, in the face of obvious issues. Okay, and are the issues debilitating? Are they preventing him from being the president? I don't know because I'm not his doctor. Okay, but I would love to have my brother's doctor. I'd love to have my brother examine him and see what he thinks, and then I would know. So I'm not going to judge him from a TV, showing or whatever. But it's not that hard to see that he's got some issues. By the way, if you see me walking around, you're going to say, "Hey, John, you're not doing so well either." You're absolutely right, and I will admit it. So I'm not going to sit there and pretend that he doesn't have issues. And they defended him, and then they put him on stage, and then the very next day they trashed him like I've never seen before. His own people. They're going to consume their own. They're going to eat their own, and they should be ashamed. And by the way, that's why I have no respect for him. If that's how you're going to be, I have no respect for you. If you were going to support him a week ago, you should be supporting him today. Okay, I would have more respect for them, even though it's ridiculous to continue to suggest that he doesn't have an issue. I would be more in line with supporting him, the media, because at least they didn't abandon him at the first, I shouldn't say it's definitely not the first signs of issue. There's been plenty of signs out there, but the first, it was just so obvious that no one could deny it, that they're going to abandon him and toss him to the curb. After, by the way, if you're a lefty, hey, he won the election, right? He got Trump out. Doesn't he get a medal for that? If you're a lefty, and now you're going to toss him to the curb? Okay. I'll tell you what, I don't want to be a lefty if that's how they're going to treat their own people. That's not a good thing. So I hope they all reconsider their vilification of their leader. Okay, you should back your leader, regardless, and they should be ashamed of themselves. And I have no sympathy for them. I let them eat each other. That's what they're doing, and God bless them. Anyway, all good. The Trump case, the Supreme Court case, I think it has zero implications at all because it's already been the law. It has been the law. And it's not going to change anything. The cases that they're bringing they're going to either prevail or they're going to, die on their own merits, not because of this ruling. And I think, the election will decide who our next president is. It's going to be the people. And if young people want to get rid of the old people, this is your chance. You got a 3-to-1 edge over us boomers, and go after it. And I encourage you to. By the way, I don't want to be part of the leadership anymore. It's your time. It's your time to, to carry the water. I did my job, and it's your time to go out there and do it, run the country, figure all this stuff out, make sure everything, get everybody fed, get them all a job, get on it. I did my part. I raised my family. I got them all through school. I got them all jobs. It's your turn, and I'm happy to pass the baton to anyone who wants it, and to go about my, retirement and live in peace, in America, by the way. I'm not running away because I don't like what's going on here. I love this country, and I'm not leaving because I don't agree with who's in the office, and I don't agree with the Supreme Court's ruling, or I don't agree with the ridiculous amount of taxes that I have to pay. I still rather be here. So for all of you people who don't want to be here and think that America sucks, well, there's a lot of other countries out there. We can get you on a plane pretty quick. Matter of fact, I got to maybe start a little GoFundMe for people who want to go, and we'll get them plane tickets. That's something, Jen, put that on the agenda. Maybe we'll start a little GoFundMe for people who want to get out. They hate our country so bad, and we'll help them out by getting them a ticket to the country of their choice, preferably Russia, China, North Korea. I think those are great places to start. Living over there should be much better. All right, enough of that. That was just a joke. I'm sorry. That was cheap shot, and I try not to do that. Jen will go through and she'll look at all the stuff I just said in my rants here, and she'll coach me on how to tone it down and go back and get some more anger management classes, and to be the kind and gentle person that everyone who really knows me knows who I am. But these things kind of tick me off because I can't stand it when people who really don't have the chops to have these conversations talk with such definitiveness. I don't mind them taking an opinion. I don't mind them having their say, but to suggest that they definitively understood the rulings and they miscite the facts, they miscite the law, they miscite the rulings, that kind of ticks me off. Okay, at least bring somebody on your show that might know something, and then let them educate you. Anyway, signing off, and happy 4th. Hit the like and subscribe button, and we love you.